All right, we're ready to begin. Thanks for those of you who have had the courage and fortitude to come back for a second session, and welcome to those who have no idea what you're getting into. That's a good mix of people, Andy, and I think we'll do right well. I think if you have a seat vacant close to you, you might help those coming in to find it. Got a few. We're very informal. Come right in front of me here. And never mind that you'll be on video the rest of your life. There you go. There you go. You always wanted to be on video, right? Yesterday, we talked about a number of things. It was a matter of introduction, and one of the things that I hope doesn't go unnoticed is that we hope that Andy and I, through our, 30 or 40 years of friendship, are in a sense, we're painfully aware of the pluses and the minuses that we are modeling how difficult this is, and yet at the same time how necessary it is to be really honest and forthright. And I told somebody yesterday, Andy, that at age 83 you earn the right to say whatever you want to say.
That only includes you. I'm out of that.
No, I'm on the way to losing my inhibition, so I'll catch up with you. I think one of the points that we left off would be a good place to connect for today had to do with the nature of the church and society, and Andy had some really good observations there. Andy, you have a background, for those of you that are not aware of Andy's background, he got a background in ministry, 4 years. Even got a ministry in the same church, even has a street named after him in Atlanta. And has been an attorney, a jurist, a judge. He has a doctor of ministry degree, and he has done it all. And he is uniquely qualified, both from that angle, but also from just living, to speak to a lot of things over the last 50 years. But we have to remember our stated goal. In fact, I think that's what's in the program, is what lies ahead. And so we want to be aware at some point in our time today to switch gears and talk about what would we like to see happening 25 years from now. But before we get to that, let's talk about what happened this summer with the Supreme Court rulings. Judge Hairston, I imagine you have an opinion on that, pardon the pun.
Oh, yes, I have an opinion. I can't get to write it, though, like they did. Well, I'm not receptive to the decision that was made, and I'm like the dissenting justices. Their position was that the court's position wasn't to make law, but to define law. And there's nothing in the Constitution that gives the Supreme Court the right to make a decision making law. And I'm still at the point where, along with my personal position about same-sex marriage, that it's out of the range of the court to to change the definition of marriage, which they in fact did. And so I'm displeased with that, and I'm a part of any opposition to that doesn't go to picking up guns and shooting. But I'm working with groups and those that are in opposition to that, giving all the support that I can, and I'll be on the line for it.
All right. That maybe, if you want to come back and talk a little bit about that a little bit later, we can certainly do in our question time. We're trying to get to as many questions as we can. We also mentioned just briefly yesterday that it's the tendency of whites in a predominantly white society, or white-dominated society, right there, before we end that sentence, we're in trouble with some people because they would deny that. But I'm going to go ahead and say I'm assuming that that is a fact, and I can prove it in any number of ways. It is a gravity pull and maybe a human tendency to keep things the same. And so, what we're talking about in here is change, isn't it?
Yes, definitely so.
And
It's
so,
hard to do that.
why is it hard? What do you think?
Because we like where we are. And we are always, I think, always interested in having the advantage in the situation. And to balance things out, many times we find ourselves having to give up what we have to reduce the amount of it that we have, or to change the way we think and go to a system of a systematic approach that would lessen the tension and allow things to happen. And I think that we're not really ready to do that. In race relations, for instance, if you look at an equation on it, with blacks being where we are in this country and have been for a number of years, it's a gain for blacks for us to do a better job of integration, and it's a reduction or loss for whites in a lot of ways. And we have really looked at that equation. It's to our advantage, and for the whites to have a greater possession, losing some of their properties and their assets and their ownership, so as to share. It's a loss of possessions, and we look at it in terms of pluses and minuses. That's the reason why I think we have to go after it from, if you were white, if I were white and you were black, or et cetera, a situation like that, what would be fair? And that doesn't make it happen. But at least it gives you something to start working toward. Some of us blacks have as much trouble with whites as whites do with blacks. I know a lot of blacks that hate white folk. And I use that term because that's how they describe it. I came out of a background, Winston-Salem, Piney Grove, North Carolina. The white kids I grew up, we rocked each other home every time we met, so forth. We lived in the same community, etc. We were known that we were not on the same track. And a part of our stuff was the envy of them having and us not having. Now, if I'm going to be a part of an integratable society, etc., I got to well remember that and make it part of my consciousness. That's not something I can drag along with me. I have to drop that. So I have to set up a system that will allow for a reduction of that in my thinking, and help me to get normalized. Because one fellow has said integration can only take place where there are equals. An unequal and an equal cannot integrate. So we have to think from a level of equality, of equal. You're just as good as I am. You may be deprived of some things that you ought to have, but in terms of human quality, I'm no better than you are. I can say that much easier than I can do it. You see the same thing away from race. You see it in genderism. We've been trained to treat women differently. And I don't have to get up in the morning and think how I'm going to treat them. I already know. And when they try to climb out of that ladder, we'll be pushing them back down. Unless I bring myself to say, that's not what Joel 2:28 said. That's not what Paul said in Galatians 3:26 and 27. And come on in, sister. That one sit right here.
Chair of honor.
I have a problem with that, but I have to bring myself to do what I know is right. And making right a part of my consciousness is the problem. It's not going to automatically happen. I've been married my wife said I've been married 55 years to her.
You mean there's more?
Yeah, that's right. But I said yesterday, and I'll say again today, the Christian of tomorrow and the rest of today, going to have to learn to live by the prevailing attitude of I run into something, how do I handle that? You can't handle tomorrow's stuff today. You can anticipate it, but life is changing so fast. Our backgrounds are altogether different now, and children we're dealing with think differently and see differently. I was listening the other day, my wife and I were talking about it, and they were questioning, who was his name? An educator. And he said what's going on now is that people don't live by, we'll pray our way out of this thing anymore. That's a thing of the past, basically. That background thinking is violence and reaction. And that's a different person to deal with. So what is the commonality back there? So that's where we are on that, and we have to bring ourselves to find what is common ground for us, and how can we move forward.
Well, the other thing too that you mentioned yesterday that I thought was really good, and that is, I'll put it in my language, creating a space between what happens and what you are conditioned to respond to. If you create a space, to me, that's a very much a Christ-centered way of looking at things, and say, just that one little space, and say, oh my goodness, what is happening here? I cannot go with my impulse. I cannot go with my knee-jerk response. It is inappropriate.
That's right.
It is not Christ-like. But by and large, if you look at, let's just say, the incidences that we've been dealing with in the news, the white-black conflict, mainly involving police, that seems to be a common thread through there, that it is just so rapid and knee-jerk reaction that people don't have the time, or let's just say they don't take the time to think through the implications of what they're about to do. That goes for everybody involved. And so that's an intriguing thing. Maybe that ought to be an element in our, what do we hope 25 years from now would look like, and that is that if we're trained to respond in a certain way, I think we could be untrained and retrained by Christ and his teachings to think in a different way. And maybe our problem is that we still think in the old conditioned way, which you mentioned yesterday, has its roots in multiple generations. You cannot get away from that. We have a group of people who say that was then, this is now, let's just go on with it. Or it was handled through legislation. And the kind of thing that you and I are talking about is still there. It's not handled by legislation, right?
That's right. And we have to be able to say that and really walk away from it. We said, this is now, that was then. But now our deeper thinking then is still with us. It influences and impacts our thinking. It's a very difficult process. I've come to, wherever I've come to a lot of thinking. And just like I said yesterday, the biblical passage that the sins of the father are fallen down through the children, down through the third and fourth generation. And once it's with us, it's there. It can't be changed. And we have to, in spite of that, God gives us the ability to walk away from it and walk over it. But it's not going to happen just because we pray or we try to think spiritually. And it really is a sad situation for all of us. And I think we really have to pull ourselves together and give God our hearts the best way we can and do the best we can with whatever we have and be patient and hopeful for each other.
One of the things that we promised one of the listeners that we would do today is to get into some very concrete things that we can do. So what can we do? What do we do next? Where's Dr. Taylor? Dr. Jerry Taylor and Andy and I were talking outside. Curtis King was in that group. And he came up with an idea that has worked very well for him. And so, Jerry, would you mind just standing up and where you are there, tell us what we talked, in essence, what we talked about yesterday.
I think we were trying to make the case that too often we focus on doing instead of on being. And the most significant being, I think, as Christians in the context of the church, is the being of God. And so how can two human beings step into that sacred ground of our human beingness and experience the presence of the living God together, where there are two or three gathered together in my name there, and I also in the midst of them. And what do we do when we are in that space together with God is that we have to listen individually to the voices from the past that have shaped us, and we have to listen to those voices together. So I had the privilege of going to a monastery in South Texas called House of Prayer with a white minister who preaches for a congregation in Oxford, Mississippi. And we were able to sit together in silence and then to come out of the silence, and he began to confess his faults, how he had been trained and conditioned and taught to hate African Americans and Latinos and Asians. And then I was able to listen to that and to take that back with me into my silence and to pray for his heart. And then I was able to confess to him how I had grown up in a very oppressive environment in West Tennessee and some of the emotional baggage that I carried with me. And so emptying that into that sacred space in the presence of God with my brother, looking me in the eye, I'm looking my brother in the eye, there's something miraculous that happens there that we as human beings cannot take credit for. And I think it's God reconciling us back to himself and to one another. And I think that's where the original reconciliation existed, that due to our rebellious nature, we veered from that.
Yep.
God is calling us back to that. And we won't be able to experience genuine reconciliation until we go back into the ground of our being, which is the light of God. And I think we kind of bypass that sometimes. We're trying to fix it ourselves as human beings with our own limited knowledge, and we end up going round and round in circles and making no progress at all.
Thank you. I think that's a very practical thing to do. If I could come at it, I think in a credible way, and that is pick somebody else out that is totally different from you and spend time with that person. And you know how relationships go like this? When you finally get to know somebody, what do? You start revealing more of yourself because you say, well, it's safe to do that. And what Jerry is saying is that power of silence, that we're together for a purpose and we're going to spend the first several minutes in silence and then see what we say. And what Jerry is saying through his own testimony is there's a lot of power in that silence. We're looking for practical things to do. Jerry is talking about a way of changing our being. And so that's a whole different scale, whole different level. Now there are some practical things we can do, but that is among the hardest. I was talking to a white preacher. We're using white and black here for terms of convenience, but I trust that you understand there are other designations that are probably more appropriate. There were, I don't know, a couple of 3 months ago, you may have been with this group. 10 white preachers in Church of Christ and 10 black preachers took a 1-week trip together in various civil rights spots. And one of the white preachers said to me, he could hardly talk about it. He said, "It is the most impactful week of my life." And I would say a lot of what happened was just in that bus, eating together, just talking, and those barriers start coming down. And so that's an individual level, some of the things we can do. Andy, what's your response to what's being said here?
Well, I was going to go back to, I couldn't remember the doctor's name, but he's well known, Dr. Cornel West.
Yes.
Heavy educator.
Uh-huh.
So listening to him on television the other day, brought something out of my mind that I had not been able to put it that way before. This current society does not seek solutions through prayer, but through violence. Therefore, we are missing in not dealing with the mind that deals with violent solutions. So we got to be concerned about how the mind functions and works that we're dealing with and to whom we're trying to correct things. If it thinks only with violence, guns, etc., they go to them and don't even give any thought. The other thing, I listened to a teacher in our Sunday school who's a retired public school teacher, and she said that she noticed that her children were not dealing with problems in an amicable way. So she asked him, "Don't you know better than that? Haven't you been taught that that's not correct?" And the child responded in such a way that she said to me, "I realized that the children coming up now do not have a conscience as such, do not have a real basis for making decisions." And that's incredible. What we were given by our parents when we came along, even if we did wrong, we were able to identify it. So she said it's worse, even worse than that. Along with that, I think that I keep pressing on this idea of what affects race as to spreading it out over everything. You got to come up with a concept, I think, to deal with situations that is just the way you function. Not when race issues comes up, but is the guiding of God in your life, or a strong conscience and respecting the right of people, because the persons whom I'm mistreating, who are black or white, may not be a race issue. But I just have to learn how to deal with wrong, myself when I'm wrong. And we don't like to really admit we're wrong. We try to find out a way to justify it. And I think so that's one of the things I think we really got to struggle with hard, because if we log it in just on race, then we're free otherwise keep doing the wrong things out there. We just got to learn to think better, period.
A systemic issue,
Yeah,
not
yes.
not isolated.
That's right. It's a part of the world we live in. And it was so heavy in the area of race that it steals our mind from other things for that. But we have a human problem. We have an attitude of not treating people right. A black man does something to me that if a white man does it, I see it as racism. And the black guy did the same thing. I won't call it racism. So it's something down there that's wrong with us that cannot be pigeonholed in any one particular area. It's how we relate to people and how we feel about them. And that's why I think Jerry's statements are excellent and very good. And I think along with that, you got to learn how to just see life as it is, and where we ought to be, and how do we deal with it more amicably for God.
It would seem to me that once you start this process that Jerry described, this self-revealing and kind of mutual confession and beginning to see things in a clearer light, it has far-reaching ramifications into your family life, into the way you do business, the way you drive, on and on and on. The attitude you have toward of the people, of
Road
strangers, road rage. It is, it can be a frightful world out there. Now, let me get you to ask some questions. Let's get some discussion going, because I think what Andy said the last 5 or 10 minutes is sterling.
I'd like to ask Dr. Hairston, do you feel that reparations, are you a proponent of reparations to African Americans from slave days, that we should be paying money?
In a sense, I am. But I just think the way you ought to relate to, you should take that into consideration in our holistic deal. Because the black race has got deprived of a lot of things, and we try to do it with the Indians. And it came to be a very poor system. But I'm not for just going on any kind of view. That's not who I am.
How would you go about doing it? Would it be at the
I have to give that some thought.
federal?
You know, you throw something on me like that.
You better come back next year and think about that a year.
Make a year after that. It's a very good thought. It's a very good thought. And I appreciate you bringing it up. Anybody else got any hard questions out there? We appreciate them, because that's what we got to deal with, the hard questions.
Get them out there.
As long as you can leave a session like this and sit back and say, well, he didn't deal with that. He didn't deal with that. It excuses you. So Royce and I are willing to take anything you throw out there.
Especially Andy.
And we have to develop the ability not to get angry when people say things that cross us and challenge us. That's a real common practice. Many times, people will not tell you what's right or tell me what's right, what they really think, because they don't want to lose our relationship. So I need to be prepared for my wife, for Royce, as I did with John Allen Chalk, Prentice Meadows, and those. We sat down and just really told it like it was. And we became greater friends. And that's breaking down a lot of the barrier. But that's an excellent question.
Dave?
Well, a scripture and a thought.
Yeah.
There's some things you said yesterday, I've just been chewing on the last 24 hours. It just very profound to me. And the passage I think about is Colossians 3:10 and 11. Put on your new nature and be renewed as you learn to know your Creator and become like Him.
Amen.
Now see, that's the key. Because then it says, in that new life, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or a Gentile.
And he was dealing with a racial issue.
Yeah, it's just profound. It doesn't matter if you're circumcised or uncircumcised, barbaric, uncivilized, slave or free. Christ is all that matters. And He lives in all of us.
The hard part of the gospel.
How do we miss that? The goal then is not to make better Jews out of the Jews, or better Gentiles out of the Gentiles, or better whites out of the whites, or blacks out of the blacks. It's to make better Christians out of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but what really got me, or what you said yesterday, because I believed this passage for so long, and I think I've tried to live it out, but what I realize is that even though I may not be racist, I am not free from racism. And even though I believe myself not to be prejudiced, I am profoundly impacted by prejudice.
It's a powerful statement.
And that's what I haven't worked hard enough on.
Yeah. This whole idea, if we see ourselves as God sees us, which is in a sense what you're saying there, it's really a frightful thing, and it sure makes you identify with the publican who says, all he can say is, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner. Because what we're talking about here is heavy, deep plowing. And the symptom may be an occasional racist remark or action, but it is far, the roots extend far beyond that. And Andy's mentioned other categories that it goes in. Marion?
David and I grew up next door, literally next door neighbors. And I know our background. From where we grew up, this really wasn't the problem. But when I graduated Texas, when I graduated from ACC, I went to Memphis, Tennessee. I've never been in a world like that. I've never been in a world like that. I was ashamed
Yeah.
to be in a world like that. Didn't even know it existed. And for him, he mentioned we had it. Well, if we did, it wasn't much. We just didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't. We didn't grow up that way. Our parents didn't allow it.
Okay, go that.
Let me say one other thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the point the chaplain made is a profound point. And the passage, trouble that has given me trouble all of my life from a child, is Joel 2:28. It is a passage of balance. And where the only thing matters is you and Christ. They started off in the early church with that. And they got in trouble with it. The early church wasn't willing to follow it. That's why Paul was saying what he did in Galatians 3:26 to 27. And we look at that a different way. And I think it's the area where the church fails to be the church. To me, a black man growing up in the church, I've never thought we really came to be what we ought to be, even when I preached the ain't but one church. And I shouldn't have to have that. None of us should have to have that. That our preaching is more profound than our lives. And I don't think we can be the church. I'm just confessing now. I don't think we can be the church until we fulfill those passages.
Whoa. Yep.
That's the problem. And that hurts.
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
As to what he said.
Yeah.
I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee.
Yeah.
I was 10 years old when
Yeah.
Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. We were terrified.
Yeah.
Burning the city.
Yeah.
My daddy happened to have a lumber company in a bad part of the city.
Yeah.
From then on, Memphis was absolutely the worst place racially ever. And I grew up in Christian schools. I went to Harding Academy of Memphis. I never once heard that Martin Luther King Jr. was trying to have peace. In Memphis, we were taught he was a bad man. And it was when I was at this university, I went, wow, that's what he was about? Because you just didn't get it in Memphis. So I can relate so much. I'm very ashamed of what we've done.
Well, I think these are profound testimonies about how much we're shaped from our past, and we've all got to bring it to the altar, so to speak. And nobody is without fault. Nobody's made it, and it gives to me weight that the church is composed of a bunch of sinners, and part of that is, we've already mentioned the word confession. I don't know what that means for you. May mean something different than what it means for me, but I think that passage, David, is so convicting. It is so convicting, and it is aimed right at what we're talking about. Right at what we're talking about. Yes.
You mentioned, you read the quote, there's too much tendency toward violence and not prayer, more it seems. I think the exceptions to that sound out so much of the grace that we give each other, we give others. I remember the Amish school shooting, the reactions of the families to that, and then this year, the AME Church in South Carolina. It caught the nation's and the world's attention that these families that had been hurt, destroyed, had that kind of reaction. I know our predominantly white church in Texas, folks make prayer shawls and had prayer over them, and a lady visited that AME church in South Carolina and expressing unity and empathy there. But I guess the question I wonder, toward each other, toward others, how do you see in the next 25 years that this grace could become so much more apparent and powerful?
I think what we're talking about, this sense of grace and forgiveness, If hatred can spread as fast and as far as it has, I think grace can spread further. And if it can't spread further, then it's not gospel, it seems to me. So I have the least amount of pity and patience with somebody who says, this is the way I am, this is who I am. Bull feathers. I mean, cash it in, turn in your Bible, and go golf on Sunday because you're not in the flock. It just flies in the face of everything that Jesus said. And so, boy, 25 years from now, what I hope the legacy we leave, and as I said yesterday with tongue in cheek, we're not going to be around, so somebody check on whether we were right. And we'll talk to you over there, right inside the gate.
Hooray!
I just want anywhere inside the gate. I don't care where inside. I think we can resolve if, I don't know how many people are in here, maybe 80 or 100 people. If we can just resolve, we're gonna be different. We're gonna make a difference. We're gonna start with ourselves, and we're gonna start with our family. We're gonna start with our friends, and from this day forward, something is going to be different. We're going to take a look at that, at the scriptures that we've never had before. Tell Jeannie hello. Tell her you're doing a good job.
Has a question over there?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't say it. Yes.
Well, perhaps looking into the future, perhaps the peace that we all seek is inevitable as Christianity has fallen or is falling from grace in the eyes of the market square, the center of town. Maybe we'll realize that maybe we must realize, or we will inevitably realize that we got bigger fish to fry. You got a Bible, I got a Bible, and it's us against the world. With rich and poor folks, we're going to have to go, oh, there's no class in Christianity because it's us against the world. And there's no black and no white, or no Jew and no Gentile in the future because it's us against the world. Maybe the trouble that seems to be on the horizon for the followers of Christ will do us the most good in making us drop our categories and go, we must be on the same team because we are all a minority now.
Right.
Because of the secularism and the predominance of it and the rapid increase of it, I think one of the lies they sell is the lie of the categories. If you can buy into the categories, you immediately go to ranking. Particularly in America, we know how to do this. Top 10, top 5, and good, bad. You can't, win, lose. Look at our language. And so I think in Christ we have to adopt an entirely new language. And there isn't any room for hand wringers and pessimists in this vision for 25 years from now. I think it just takes rolling up our sleeves, doing the hard work, and refusing to give in. If you have a man in a Roman prison who is writing a church that he loves, a little church in Philippi, a town full of retired military people, Roman soldiers, mainly, and you look at how many times he tells them to rejoice. And he does not let them feel sorry for him. He said, don't you feel sorry for me. God is opening some kind of a door for me. I may not see all the way through, but God is going to work this out for his good. Anyhow, enough preaching.
On the subject of categories
Yes.
and the lie that is, one of the new phrases, or at least new to some people, is first world problems versus third world problems, which is troubling to me because first always implies better. And third always implies not near as good. I don't know what happened to second, but it's first and third. And
Talk to me about second later.
I think we need to,
Yeah.
as Christians, we need to steer clear of that categorizing first world and third world problems. We sort of make a joke out of it, like a first world problem is my air conditioner's broken, but it is not a joke. We are all one world, not a first world and a third world, and the problems of the people who are suffering are our problems too.
You really see that through the pages of Acts in particular, and all the way through the New Testament. Absolutely. Very well said. Someone else? Yes.
You know, in light of our conversation and what the church looks like in the next 25 years, one of the things that I think that we need to be on guard, or we need to be looking at, is the decisions that the Supreme Court has made in legalizing, in their world, same-sex marriages.
Yeah.
How does that, or how I think there's going to be an impact on the church. And looking at it from, I think, the government's point of view, or from that side, the government looks at religion and all the religions as Christians, if that's what we want to call ourselves. And you have, you know, Protestants, and you have different religions, Baptists and all of this. And then you have Churches of Christ and the rest and everyone else. Now, you have some Christians over here accepting that. And they're marrying same-sex in the church, you know, and the ministers are performing these ceremonies. Then you come to a Church of Christ, and that Church of Christ says, oh no, we're not, you know, that goes against all our teachings, at least in my mind and what I've been taught thus far in life. But the government turns around and says, well, okay, y'all all Christians. These Christians over here are doing it. Well, why aren't y'all doing it? Okay, and if you're not going to do it, then here's our response. We'll take away your tax exempt status. Okay, I feel that this is a direct attack on the church. And it's something that we need to bring to our conversation, bring to the table, and be prepared for what is about to come our way. And this is part of what the church is going to look like in the next 25 years.
It is.
Can you
It
give
is.
me any, you know?
Very quickly, it seems to me that the church-related colleges and universities are the most vulnerable. The individual churches are on down the line a little bit, not exempt, but a little less vulnerable. Right now, in fact, today there was a statement issued by the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, of which ACU is a member, 130 institutions. It came out just a while ago. And they're basically, well, we don't know exactly what happened, but the two Mennonite schools who are granting same-sex benefits to faculty and staff have voluntarily withdrawn from the association. What probably will happen is that the media will get hold of that, and it will come down pretty hard on us. I don't know how to escape that. My idea is to quietly and cautiously approach things like this and not be in a reactionary mode and lash out. I think churches or institutions or whatever that lash out, for one thing, the media rips you to shreds. Not that that's the ultimate standard to avoid, but why do it needlessly? You'll bring needless criticism on the body of Christ. But we have to remember that the church of the first century lived and flourished and thrived and grew in a government that was far more hostile to this one. And you can point to places all over the world. China would be my number one example, where Christianity is growing faster in a hostile government than most of us can imagine. One of the underground church preachers a few years ago showed me a little photo album. He said, let me show you through a translator. Let me show you a picture of some of our recent conversions. I thought this ought to be good. What do? Raise their hand and accept Christ. What do they do? Every picture was a baptism. This guy had never heard of the Church of Christ.
You
Or
don't
the Baptist church, for that matter. Or, you know, but where did he get that? Well, they read it somewhere. They read it somewhere. So I think we have to cool our old individualist American spirit to lash out in opposition.
Yes.
And sit back, take a deep breath, and say, is this worth falling on our sword? Because I think this is the frontal part of the attack. I don't think it's the last. I just think it's the most recent. And so we better learn how to survive and dodge this kind of thing, even to the point of, we may absorb A or B or C, but at some point, there's going to be that proverbial line in the sand. We're going to have to draw it and say, we can't go any further than that. And you're exactly right. That may well be within the next 25 years. We hope not. But I'll tell you what, if that happens, Jesus is still Lord.
Yes, he is.
We're going to stop on that one. How about this will be our last. Go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to say on that, there are institutions, legal institutions out there, especially existing to handle this type of process. As again we come back, you have to handle each issue as we come to it. Don't lose heart, don't give up, and make your contributions. I don't mean financial, everywhere you can. Support people who are against this just like you are. And I get mail in the mail every day from them. And they're good lawyers put together, and we use our resources. And then you have to look at what do we lose if we lost as the church. What do we lose? How much do we lose? You just got to balance it out. You're gonna have to make the decision. That's one thing that's certain. But the chances are good that we're going to have to face these type of situations.
This may be God's way of bringing us together.
Come on, man.
So, okay, you're really dismissed.
Thanks for coming. God bless everybody.